The silence that followed her threat was worse than any scream. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked out, slow, deliberate, unfazed by the storm she had just unleashed. But the storm came. Oh, it came fast. 2 mornings later, the country woke up to a media explosion. Kang Junho's secret past exposed. Was he involved in a burglary murder cover-up? The headlines weren't just news. They were weapons, slicing through Junho's reputation with surgical cruelty. At first, he tried to ignore it, refused calls, turned off the television. Then came the final blow. A courier arrived with a thick white envelope, sealed with the signature crest of his wife's legal team. Inside, divorce papers. Attached was a public statement already released to the press. Mrs. Kang expresses deep regret over her husband's hidden past and his association with violent crimes. As a known celebrity, she cannot remain married to a man tainted by deceit and scandal. His stomach dropped. Not even a personal message. No goodbye. Just a signature and shame. He collapsed onto his office chair, hands trembling, eyes locked on the papers. 5 years ago, he had walked away from Rosaline like she was nothing. Now, the entire world was watching her rise from the ashes while he crumbled under the weight of secrets. Rosaline's final words looping in his mind. Try me. Oh, she had. And this was only the beginning. The courtroom was already packed. Reporters, lawyers, family members, and a sea of curious onlookers filled every bench. Flashes from cameras lit up the marble room as the judge entered. But the only pair of eyes Junho could feel were hers. Rosaline. She sat in the front row, calm but glowing with quiet vengeance. Dressed in a regal maroon dress and a black blazer, she looked nothing like the broken woman they had once thrown into prison. Her head was held high, her gaze steady, her expression unreadable, except for the slight upward twitch at the corner of her lips. Junho dared to glance at her, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned slightly forward, like a queen watching justice unfold. Defendant Junho Lee, you are hereby charged with perjury, obstruction of justice, and framing an innocent party for murder, the prosecutor's voice thundered. Do you understand the charges? His throat tightened. Yes, Your Honor, he muttered, barely audible. The world watched. Korea watched. And Rosaline, she finally exhaled. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming her truth. As the judge slammed the gavel and set the trial date, Junho was taken away. The crowd erupted in murmurs. But Rosaline didn't move. She smiled. Not because he was in chains, but because justice, at last, had a name. As the courtroom echoed with the sound of the final gavel, the cameras turned not only to Junho, but to the man seated stoically in the back row, Senator Park. His face was unreadable. No twitch, no tear, just a cold stare, like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than anyone knew. Junho, now in handcuffs, turned desperately toward his father as the guards gripped his arms. Appa, please, he choked out. Say something, do something. But Senator Park didn't even blink. He slowly stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked out of the courtroom with the weight of power in his stride, as if he had just buried a mistake, not a son. The murmurs began immediately. Reporters whispered, why didn't the senator try to stop the trial? Did he let this happen? Rosaline stood just feet away, catching every word, watching every reaction. She expected him to fight for Junho, to use his influence to suppress the case, just like before. But he didn't. Not this time. Outside, when reporters approached the senator for comment, his voice was chillingly calm. My son's actions do not reflect the values I stand for. Justice must be served. With that, he entered his black car and drove off, leaving behind a son in chains, a legacy in ruin, and a woman rising from the ashes of betrayal. Rosaline smiled faintly. Even karma needed a little help sometimes. The estate was quiet, too quiet. The headlines were still hot with news of Junho's conviction, and the world was just beginning to digest the fall of the once perfect political A. But behind the tall iron gates of the senator's mansion, something darker had begun to brew. Rosaline was in the hallway, organizing some files the senator had carelessly thrown at her the night before. She was trying to keep the peace together. But peace was not on the senator's agenda. Without warning, he stormed out of his study, tie loosened, rage pulsing through his veins. "You think this gives you power over me?" he barked. Rosaline turned, startled but steady. "What are you talking about? You walk around this house like you matter. Like your dirty little victory in court changed who you are," he shouted, stepping too close. "I didn't do this for power. I did this for truth," she said, her voice calm but edged with strength. "Your son destroyed my life. That's when it happened." His hand slammed hard against the wall beside her face, not hitting her, but close enough. "You're here because I let you be here," he growled. "Don't forget your place, prison girl." She didn't flinch. "Not this time. You let me be here, because without me, your legacy falls," she whispered, staring him straight in the eyes. "But now I see it. You're no better than your son." And for the first time, Rosaline saw the senator's mask crack, just a little. But later that night, alone in her room, she sat on the edge of her bed, haunted. Justice had been served, but her heart felt heavier than she expected. She had seen Junho's eyes in court, broken, distant. Something inside her, despite everything, still remembered the boy she once loved, the laughter they once shared, the kiss on the bridge under the rain. And now, watching the senator unravel day by day, unleashing a bitterness he had long suppressed, she felt something else, pity. Not for his power, but for how empty he truly was without control. She moved through the mansion like a shadow, present, but no longer attached. Because even though her heart had once bled for him, it was now learning how to heal, slowly, painfully, and without apology. Rosaline sat in the cold prison visitation room, her fingers nervously tapping the scratched metal table. Across from her, behind the thick glass, Junho was thinner, paler, but still had the same eyes, the same brokenness that once called out to her heart. He picked up the phone, his voice trembling. "You came." She nodded slowly, her heart aching even though she fought to feel nothing. "I don't even know why. Maybe just to be sure you're still breathing." "I deserved what happened," he said, eyes lowering in shame. "But not a day goes by I don't think about how you took the fall for me. I was a coward, and I'm so sorry." She hung up the phone before he could finish, stood up quickly, and walked away. But someone else had been watching. Later that night, Senator Lee stood by the window of the mansion, sipping dark liquor. His face was unreadable. Rosaline walked in, only for his voice to cut through the silence like a blade. "You went to see him." Her breath hitched. He turned around, eyes colder than ever. "I knew all along he was your ex-lover. I let you destroy him. I gave you that power. But now, it's over." Rosaline's voice trembled. "I just wanted to." He slammed the glass down on the table. "You will not go near him again. Do you understand me? I own this house and make the rules, your comfort, and your silence. You've had your justice. It ends now." Rosaline stared at him, stunned. For the first time, she realized she may have traded one prison for another. That night, the mansion felt colder than ever. Rosaline sat quietly in her room, the lights dimmed, her thoughts spinning like a storm. Her visit to Junho had reopened old wounds she thought she'd buried. She had expected to feel triumphant seeing him locked away, but instead, her heart had cracked. Behind those prison bars, he was just a broken man, not the monster she had once painted him to be. But Senator Kang was not a man to be trifled with. He barged into her room without knocking, his face stern and cold. "I warned you," he said quietly, almost too calmly. "You went to see him again." Rosaline lifted her head slowly, her expression unreadable. I needed closure. Closure! His voice rose, finally breaking into a sneer. You think you're entitled to closure after what that man did? She didn't flinch. And what about you? She shot back. You let me get close to you just to use me. You knew the whole time who Junho was to me. He moved closer, his steps heavy. I gave you protection, a name, a home, and you repay me with betrayal. Betrayal, she whispered bitterly. I did everything you asked, but I never agreed to stop feeling. I'm not a doll you can control. There was a long, tense silence. Senator's hands trembled slightly, but his face remained hard. You own me, Rosaline, he said darkly, and you will never see that boy again. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from the cruel realization that she had traded one prison for another. And this one had velvet walls and golden locks. The prison yard was quiet that morning, a new alley so. Tension hung thick in the air, the kind of silence that hinted something was about to go terribly wrong. Junho walked alone, hands in pockets, lost in thought. He had barely spoken to anyone in days. Since the news of his divorce broke, humiliation clung to him like a second skin. He avoided the newspapers, but he couldn't avoid the whispers. Even behind bars, disgrace followed him. Then it happened. A scuffle, a blow of movement. Before he could react, a sharp blade pierced through his side. A guttural sound escaped his throat as he staggered, clutching his bleeding torso. The attacker, a bitter inmate with old ties to the senator, vanished into the chaos as guards swarmed the area. Code Red! A voice screamed. Sirens blared. Junho collapsed, blood gushing beneath him like spilled ink. As the guards carried him out, unconscious and pale, it felt like the final blow, perhaps the punishment for every secret, every lie. The news traveled fast. Rosaline was in her room and her assistant burst in, face pale. Miss Rosaline, it's Junho. He was attacked in prison. They've taken him to the hospital. Critical condition. Her breath caught in her chest. The world seemed to tilt. 10 minutes later, she stood outside the ICU, staring through the glass at the broken shell of the man who once ruined her life. He looked fragile, vulnerable. Nothing like the arrogant son of a senator who watched her walk into prison years ago. Machines beeped around him, keeping him alive. His lips were bruised, his skin ashen, his breath shallow. Rosaline felt hot tears sting her eyes. She entered the room and slowly took a seat beside him. Her hands trembled as she reached out, brushing his cold fingers. I didn't want this, she whispered, voice cracking. I wanted to see you pay, but not like this. Not like this. All the bitterness and anger began to blur with an emotion she couldn't name. She had fought so hard to forget him, to move on, but now that he was here, broken, defeated, alone, she felt something twist inside her. Not love, not forgiveness, but fear. Fear of losing him, and a pain she thought she had buried long ago. Justice had come, but her heart wasn't done speaking. Rosaline sat close to the hospital bed, her eyes red from crying, her heart heavy with guilt and fear. She hadn't left his side since he was rushed in after the brutal stabbing. The moment she saw the blood and the paramedics fighting to keep him alive, something shifted inside her. The anger she once clung to melted into terror, the terror of losing him forever. Junho stirred slightly, and her breath caught in her throat. His eyes blinked open slowly, glassy with pain but focused on her. A weak smile appeared. You're here, he whispered, voice dry and fragile. Tears filled her eyes. You almost died, Junho. Why? Why did you never fight back all these years? Why did you leave me? Why did you become this person? He winced, struggling to sit up slightly, but she gently helped him rest against the pillows. There's something I need to tell you, he began, voice shaky but clear. Something I never told anyone. Not even you. She held her breath. When I was 14, my real father, my actual dad, died in a car crash. He left behind land, chaise, buildings, wealth I was too young to even understand. But before I could even grieve, my uncle, yes, the one you know as Senator, took everything. He claimed he'd manage it for me. Instead, he took over my life. Rosaline's mouth fell open. Her heart began to race. The one she had once thought was just a strict father. Her stomach turned when he revealed that Senator was not his father at all, but his uncle, the one who had abused his mother until she died. And now I understand, Rosaline whispered, staring at the floor, why he didn't want me to visit you. Junho looked at her with tired eyes. What do you mean? He found out I came here, and he told me never to see you again, she said softly, a lump forming in her throat. He said he only allowed me to get close because he thought I was done with you, just using me to destroy you. But now that you're in prison, he's changing. He's started showing his true self, controlling me, getting angry, violent even. Junho's eyes widened with fear. Rosaline, he's doing to you what he did to my mother. She nodded, her lips trembling. Sometimes I feel like I got justice, but at what cost? I got revenge, but I'm stuck in the same nightmare. A long silence stretched between them. She squeezed his hand. I don't know what to do anymore. I still feel something for you, even after everything. And now I understand you want the villain he was. Junho, despite his pain, let a tear fall from the corner of his eye. I never stopped loving you, Rose. I just never thought you'd forgive me. She leaned in and rested her forehead on his, their breaths mingling. Maybe we can still find a way, away from all this darkness. And for the first time in years, there was a flicker of hope in both their eyes. Rosaline left the hospital with trembling hands and a mind in turmoil. Junho's weak confession haunted her like a ghost clinging to her every breath. There's proof in the old room, the cameras. His voice had cracked under the weight of his memories, and Rosaline could feel the depth of his pain that had started in his childhood and had never truly ended. That night, she sat in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to close her eyes. Sleep refused to come. Her heart thudded with questions and emotions. How could a man like Senator, respected, powerful, and polished, hide such monstrous secrets? How could he abuse a child, rob him of his inheritance, and still live with himself as though nothing happened? Rosaline's own cheek still stung from the slap she had received just a few nights ago. He was starting to treat her just like he had treated Junho's mother, controlling, cold, and violent. She had brushed it off at first, thinking it was stress or pressure, but now she saw the truth. She sat up in bed, unable to bear the silence. No, she thought, I can't just sit here and do nothing. Junho had mentioned cameras from when he was little. He had said he used to play with them, and they might have recorded something about his mother, something about the night she died. Rosaline's heart began to race. Could it be possible? Could there be real, concrete evidence hidden in the senator's mansion? She had to find it. Without a second thought, she grabbed her coat and slipped out of the apartment Senator had rented for her. She knew he was out of town for the night, attending some political fundraiser. That gave her just enough time. She arrived at the senator's estate past midnight. The gates recognized her security access, and she moved quietly through the mansion like a shadow. Her palms were sweating. She had never felt this level of fear or determination in her life. The east wing of the mansion was barely used, and it still held relics from Junho's childhood. She found the room he had described, an old dusty study filled with vintage equipment, boxes, and shelves lined with old video cameras. Her flashlight flickered slightly as she moved through the clutter. She opened a wooden chest tucked beneath a table. Her breath caught in her throat. Mini DV tapes, dozens of them, all labeled. She began to scan the labels quickly. She saw one with the date November 15. That was the day Junho's mother died. Her fingers gripped the tape tightly, her hands trembling. If this tape held what she thought it might, it could expose the truth, everything Junho had been carrying for years. Everything Senator had buried. Rosaline clutched the tapes to her chest, heart pounding. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. "This is it," she whispered. This could change everything." She tucked the tapes into her bag and slipped out of the room, her footsteps quiet but determined. The past was no longer buried, and she was going to bring the truth to light. When Senator returned to the mansion late that evening, the air was still, almost too quiet. He wasn't sure what to expect, a confrontation, coldness, or silent defiance. But instead, he found Rosaline waiting for him in the grand living room, dressed in a soft cream satin gown that clung gently to her form. Her hair was wrapped loosely in a scarf, her eyes lowered, her body language delicate. The fireplace crackled faintly behind her, casting warm shadows across the room. She looked up the moment she heard his footsteps, and before he could even drop his briefcase, she ran to him with open arms. "Uppa," she whispered, burying her face into his chest. "I missed you so much." He stood frozen for a second, stunned by the display. But the gentle tremble in her voice and the softness of her embrace melted something inside him. He cautiously held her. "The house felt so empty without you," she continued, pulling back to look into his eyes. "I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even eat. I realized how foolish I've been, going to see him, questioning your intentions. I don't want to lose you." Her voice cracked on purpose, just enough to sound real. Senator studied her face carefully. He had always been suspicious by nature, but tonight she seemed broken, tender, almost desperate. It fed his ego. "I choose you," she added softly. "I want to be your woman. I won't see him again. I promise." She reached up, brushing her fingers through his hair and then down his chest. She looked up at him with tear-glazed eyes, then gently kissed his cheek. To further disarm him, she led him to the couch, sat beside him, and handed him her phone. "If it makes you feel better, go through my internet. My messages, everything. I have nothing to hide." He blinked, surprised by the gesture. Slowly, he took the phone from her and began scrolling, messages, browser history, photos. She'd wiped away every trace of her hospital visit. The only things visible were cooking videos, fashion pages, Bible verses. "You see," she smiled gently, "I just want peace. I want us." Senator chuckled and pulled her close, satisfied. "You've really changed," he said. "That's good. I need a loyal woman by my side." "I'll be everything you need," she said softly. "Just promise me you'll trust me again." She nestled into his chest as he held her tighter, unaware of the storm quietly building inside her. Because Rosaline wasn't just here to be his loyal woman. She was here to destroy the man who ruined the lives of everyone she loved. Rosaline stood before the mirror, her makeup subtle but flawless, her wine-red dress hugging her figure with quiet elegance. She looked like the perfect trophy partner, refined, obedient, polished. But behind her calm eyes brewed a storm of strategy. This wasn't love. This was war, and she was going to win without shedding a single tear in public. Since that night, the senator had begun taking her everywhere, to business dinners, fundraising galas, and social meetings with powerful men who bowed at his feet. Rosaline walked beside him like a well-trained dove, her hands gently resting on his arm, her lips curled in soft smiles that told the world she was his. To the world, she was the reformed wife who had returned to her husband's side, choosing loyalty over scandal. To the senator, she was the woman who had seen the light, whose submission brought him pride. And to Rosaline herself, she was the undercover storm in a silk dress. She obeyed his every instruction. She answered to his calls immediately, laughed at his outdated jokes, and even endured his possessive touch without flinching. She watched as his walls of suspicion crumbled, slowly replaced by arrogance and trust. Every outing was a mission. Every dinner, a silent interrogation. Rosaline memorized his routines, learned the names of his top men, and noticed where he always left his phones, laptops, and briefcases. She watched how his thumb moved when he typed in passwords, the small gestures he made when unlocking apps, the paper trail he accidentally left on signed documents. And then came her breakthrough. One night, after a political gala, the senator, tipsy from champagne and intoxicated by her new obedience, handed her his phone with a smile. She did, quickly memoizing the 6-digit password he carelessly entered in front of her. That night, lying beside him in the darkness of their shared bedroom, Rosaline stared at the ceiling with her mind racing. She wasn't just going to expose him. She was going to take back everything he had stolen, from Junho, from his mother, and from her own soul. Rosaline sat in the grand study room of the mansion, her eyes locked on the glowing screen of her laptop. After weeks of playing the perfect, obedient wife, she had finally done it. She had cracked the senator's personal world wide open. Passwords to hidden accounts, deeds to Junho's properties, even offshore transactions masked under false identities. She had it all. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through folder after folder of digital proof. Bank statements, audio recordings, surveillance footage. But the crown jewel was the folder titled Estate Recordings, a backup of the childhood cameras Junho once used, still backed up on the mansion's old internal server. One video, in particular, chilled her, a small, scared Junho peeking from behind a cracked door as the senator slapped his mother, screaming curses. The boy's cries echoed behind the shaky footage. Her heart tightened. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks, part rage, part resolve. That man didn't just steal Junho's inheritance. He destroyed a family and wore a mask of power built on abuse. And she had lived under that mask long enough. With the flash drive safely hidden in her bra, Rosaline clicked send and forwarded the entire folder to 2 anonymous emails she had set up, one for a powerful investigative journalist and the other to Junho's lawyer. A backup was already uploaded to a cloud server under a hidden name. Later that night, she sat calmly across the dinner table from the senator, smiling gently as he bragged about his influence and the naive fools who dared to cross him. He had no idea that she was already taking him down, one secret at a time. "You've been so good lately, my darling," he said, sipping his wine. "Almost like you finally understood your place." Rosaline lowered her eyes modestly. "I have," she replied with a soft smile. "I know exactly where I belong now." He chuckled and reached for her hand. She let him, because soon the world would know who he truly was, and there would be no place for monsters like him to hide. The sun hadn't even risen when the mansion gates burst open. The red and blue lights of the police convoy pierced through the morning mist, followed by a rush of officers in black uniforms. Senator Taiwan stood at the balcony in his silk robe, confused and irritated, until the lead officer stepped forward and declared, "You are under arrest for domestic abuse, property fraud, and unlawful possession of inheritance." Rosaline stood calmly by the staircase, dressed in white, holding the file that had changed everything. Her gaze was steady, unshaken. For a moment, the senator met her eyes, searching for confusion, for panic, for weakness. But what he saw was resolve. What he saw was victory. "This is a mistake," he barked, struggling as it cuffed his wrists. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Rosaline whispered, stepping closer so only he could hear, "and the world now knows who you really are." The footage, the digital records, the abuse reports, everything had been compiled and submitted. Every layer of his secrets peeled back and displayed in courtrooms and headlines. It only took 2 days for the government to seize his assets and freeze every account linked to him. At the same time, Rosaline filed to withdraw the charges against Junho. She had provided enough evidence to prove he had been framed all along. As the news of the senator's arrest made national headlines, Rosaline quietly visited the hospital where Junho was recovering, the sun pouring gently into his room. "You're free," she whispered with tears in her eyes. "Everything is yours now, just as it should have always been." Weeks later, the court officially transferred ownership of the properties, assets, and inheritance titles to Junho, rightful heir to a fortune his mother had died trying to protect. And at the center of it all was Rosaline, the woman who had played her role, walked through fire, and came out holding the truth like a sword. She didn't do it for revenge. She did it for freedom, for Junho's future, and her own. It had been a long road, winding, stormy, and at times unbearable. But today, under a sky blushing with hues of gold and rose, everything painful melted away. In a quaint countryside chapel nestled between cherry blossom trees, Rosaline stood radiant in an off-shoulder ivory gown, her veil trailing like poetry behind her. Each step she took down the aisle toward Junho was a silent testament to the war they had fought against betrayal, injustice, and heartbreak. Junho stood breathless, dressed in a crisp white suit with a subtle emerald brooch, a nod to Rosaline's Nigerian roots. His eyes were glassy with tears, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming peace. The woman he once feared he had lost was now walking toward him to begin forever. When their hands met at the altar, time stood still. The room hushed as their fingers intertwined, anchoring them to a future they had both earned through fire and grace. The pastor's voice echoed softly, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sorrow, in joy. I do, Rosaline whispered, her voice trembling. I always have, Junho replied, sealing his words with a kiss that drew tears from every witness. Months later, in a warm countryside villa far from the shadows of their past, cries of newborn life filled the air. Rosaline, weary but glowing, cradled two tiny bundles in her arms, a boy and a girl. Junho, tears streaming down his face, knelt beside her, speechless. He gently reached out, touching their fingers, so small, so pure, so full of promise. They named them Minitseo and Chisholm, names chosen to reflect the union of cultures, the journey through chaos into light. Junho whispered a silent vow to his children, "You will never know the pain I knew, only love." Despite the scars of the past, they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected. Their home was filled with laughter, soft lullabies, and dreams finally realized. Rosaline was no longer a prisoner of circumstance. She was a wife, a mother, and a conqueror in heels. As cherry blossoms rained down outside their window, they knew one thing for sure. They didn't just survive, they won. From betrayal to billionaire love. Would you forgive someone who betrayed you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget, like, share, and follow for more dramatic stories like this one. This is Afro Love Diaries, where every heartbeat tells a story.